guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is entitled Neighbor Stole Grandpa's Parking Spot, Grandpa Got Epic Revenge. I guess that these whole neighbors are really starting in on the older generation thinking that they are easy prey. Let this story be a lesson not only to the neighbor but to anyone that thinks just because someone is old means that they are an easy target to go after. Personally, I think the older generation are sly, crafty, and don't like to let anything go. My grandpa is one of these types of people, and as a retired Vietnam vet he really doesn't want to let nasty people get away with being that way. Now the title alone might make it sound like my grandpa is crazy or something for doing this over a spot, but let me explain. Now my grandpa lives in an apartment complex and shares a parking lot with all the other residents. Everyone who lives there gets a spot, some just can be closer to the doors than others. It isn't unheard of for sometimes people to snipe good parking spots as soon as people leave. The few spots near the door though are assigned spots and are given to residents that are disabled and actively need to be close to the front entrance for obvious reasons. Grandpa with his age and a bad knee results in him needing a cane and getting that parking. One neighbor that lives in the building though just doesn't seem to get the message and constantly is trying to steal these spots. Now it is clear that they are marked with permit only and he has been told many times that he cannot park in those spots. Still, whenever Grandpa goes outside, he notices that neighbor's car is parked where it really shouldn't be. So, he decided that he was going to be the one to confront him when he parked in another renter's spot. Grandpa. You aren't allowed to park there, you know. Neighbor. Mind your own business, this is my spot. Grandpa. We both know very well that you don't have one of the permits-only spots. The real owner of that spot can call and get you towed. I have no idea if that was true because this man had been doing this for ages and never once got anything more than asked nicely not to do it again by the building's manager. So, it was probably an empty threat and all it really caused was neighbor to decide my grandpa had the spot that he wanted the most. After that, no matter where grandpa went or for how long, he would come home to find neighbor in his spot. Even if neighbor was in a different stolen spot, it was as if he was always watching, and when grandpa moved his car, neighbor would run out and move into his spot. If you don't think that this guy was being a complete jerk, then you might be more of the problem than of the solution. Anyway, though I know you want to know what caused grandpa to finally turn it up to 11 when it came to revenge. Well, grandpa had been seeing some random dents and dings on his car since that event and could never prove that it was neighbor doing it. One day though, he ended up with his entire rear fender smashed in and blue paint being left behind. Neighbor had the only blue car in the lot and suddenly his front bumper looked slightly damaged. Grandpa was parked too, so it was obvious neighbor had moved on to actually damaging his car. You might ask, well, why grandpa didn't call the police or go to the building manager? Well, he did both and the police said that he didn't have evidence that the damage was caused by neighbor, so they couldn't really do anything. And since the lot was privately owned, they would need a call from the owner of the building to have a car towed. So, grandpa went to the building manager who basically said he didn't want to get involved in the feud and wasn't going to be the parking lot police. That didn't really leave him with too many options, and like I said at the beginning, he was not the kind of man to mess with in the first place. He was going to decide that he was going to park in his spot, and he didn't really care if neighbor was already there. Sadly, I don't have the details of how it actually happened or how he managed to basically get the cars in that position. But the next time he went out and came home, he found neighbor's bright blue car once again sitting in his spot. Grandpa parked in his spot anyway, and someone with his bad knee managed to get himself out and safe from what was now sitting in the spot. The bright blue car was now half underneath my grandpa's black SUV. He figured since his car was already damaged, he really didn't care anymore and just wanted to teach neighbor a lesson. He didn't want to miss the fireworks though, so he sat outside on one of the benches and pretended to read a book until neighbor finally came outside and saw what was going on. According to grandpa, his face turned bright red as he was yelling at my grandpa about his car being destroyed. He chose this moment to act like an innocent old man that didn't know what was going on as a crowd was forming and watching a 30-year-old guy yell at this old man with a cane. Obviously, it didn't take long before the building manager and police to show up to see the commotion. They all walked to the cars and asked my grandpa what happened. He said that he just parked in his assigned spot and that's all that he knew. The police obviously didn't believe him because there was no way it was done without knowledge, but they also didn't arrest him. They had to get 2 tow trucks to take care of the mess and get both cars out of there. Grandpa didn't mind having to pay for the tow and for repairing his car because he knew that neighbor learned not to steal other people's spots after that. I don't know if anything will come from this in the future, but I do know that neighbor learned his lesson and stopped parking where he shouldn't once he got his car back and fixed. I still don't know if he thought that he was never going to get caught, never get in trouble, or just honestly didn't care. He thought that my grandpa was just some old guy that was going to roll over and give neighbor what he wanted. Instead, he took what was rightfully his after warning neighbor that he shouldn't be parking in other people's spots. Bottom line is that if anyone out there thinks old people are a good target, think again. You might end up getting some revenge served onto you that you deserved in a way that might not be the most conventional. The next story is titled, "A Karen Trespassed on Our Family Property, Got Booted Out." This just happened about an hour ago. I was just cooking some chicken for lunch on my George Foreman grill when my mother came knocking on my front door. She told me my aunt just caught a woman trespassing on her property. When confronted, the woman held out her phone and claimed she was using her GPS to come and see the waterfall. We have no waterfalls in our area, and she was not on any road for a GPS to work on. So, BS was called on that. This woman walked down a driveway that was over a quarter-mile long, past my parents' house, my grandparents' house, and then went down to my aunt and uncle's house. What's more, we have no trespassing signs everywhere. But she blatantly ignored them. We then caught the woman as she was walking back up the driveway. My mother tore into her and called her out. And my stepfather had his double-barreled shotgun and told her not to come back. But this Karen nonchalantly brushed us off and tried to play ignorant the whole time. Then my aunt came driving up and we practically had her surrounded in every direction but the road. So, she walked up the road and turned onto a nearby street. My roommate and I both recognized her as a woman we saw walking along the road recently. We live out in the hills in Oregon country. You don't usually see people walking along our street as the nearest sidewalk is like 8 miles away. So, most people out here drive. We're all of the theory this woman may have been scouting out our property because we've had thieves and drug addicts in the area do that before. And a few years ago, some trespassers vandalized our property. There is even a literal marijuana farm next door. So right now, we're on guard in case she or anyone trespasses looking for anything to steal later. Edit. I would like to point out that it was not my idea at all for my stepfather to brandish a shotgun at the lady. But he never actually pointed it at her and just held it the entire time. The rest of us were completely unarmed and only wanted to tell her off before she left. But my stepfather came out with his double-barreled shotgun and then did all that. I don't really care for meaninglessly brandishing of a firearm. However, we have patrolled with them in the past when looting was going on in our area. Also, I seem to have worded the thing about the GPS wrongly. However, there are no waterfalls for like 15 miles in any direction of where I live. So, there's no way that's what she was looking for. We believe she was possibly taking pictures or recording a video of the area. Small update. My sister has been asking around and the lady who trespassed on our property has been spotted around the neighborhood and has some people keeping a close eye on her. But thus far no one knows who she is or where she lives. The next story is titled, "The Second-Hand Car Sale." So, this actually happened to my parents a few years ago. At the time we had recently moved several states further south, and no longer had a use for a pickup truck we owned, relatively old. So, they put it up for sale. The thing is, it still had plates from and was registered in our old state, as the registration hadn't expired, and we had recently moved. So, they made it clear to potential buyers that while they would sell them the car and transfer title, the new owners would have to register it in the current state in order to legally drive it. This type of sale was legal where we are, varies by state. They found a guy interested, went through all the details and guy agrees to buy, takes the truck and all seems well. About 6 months later, I was coming home walking up to our house from the street when I was approached by 2 shady-looking guys asking me if this house was my dad's. I said he wasn't there, no one was home, and they said okay but walked up the driveway some and watched me open the garage door to go in. Totally creeped me out, so I let my parents know, but didn't think much more of it. A few weeks later they catch my dad coming in and apparently, these guys had bought the truck we sold from the previous owner. So obviously at this point, how is this our problem? Well, apparently the guy my parents sold the truck to didn't ever register it properly in the current state or get new plates for it. So basically, drove it around illegally while the registration was still valid in the previous state. But the strangest part, and what's relevant to this sub, is that these guys somehow found my parents' address, not sure how, as the old title has the address from our old state, and came demanding, not asking, demanding, that my parents pay for them to get it registered and a new title in current state. Apparently, the guy they bought it from didn't give them the title that my parents had transferred to him. So, these guys wanted my parents to go and get a new title in the current state for a vehicle that they didn't own, and was already titled to someone else, without the title, not even legal or probably possible, pay for that, and pay for the new registration. Obviously, my parents were like, WTF? No way. These guys threatened to take them to the police for illegally selling the car with a title in another state, as I mentioned, legal where we live, and that they'd be back to get their money. And that my parents owed them this for selling the car in the first place. This still boggles my mind years later when I happen to think of it. Like, did they really expect this to work? Still have no idea what they were thinking or how they thought to make it my parents' responsibility, but such is life. The next story is titled, Karen Demands Explanation About a Widow's Home. This happened back in 2013, so some of it will be paraphrased from memory. Background. Back in 2013, I, now 35 female, lived with my parents in part to help my mom take care of my dad as his health was deteriorating. Ultimately, it turned out to be cancer caused by exposure to a chemical during his military service in the U.S. Marine Corps back in the late 1960s, early 1970s that turned out to be terminal. Due to the fact that mom and I were so focused on dad's care in the time we weren't working and dad's own inability to take care of some things. Some of the more cosmetic parts of home maintenance fell by the wayside. Minor things like fixing the walkway from the driveway to the front door, not a sidewalk by the street mind you, and chipped paint on the front of the house suddenly weren't as important as trying to coax dad into taking his medications, trying to get him to eat something in the hopes it would be kept down, or making sure he made it to his appointments on time. A month or two after dad passed away while mom and I were still grieving, a wild Karen appears at our doorstep claiming to be the president of the homeowner association that did not exist in our neighborhood. Dad checked for that before he ever made the offer on the house. Mom was out at the time, and so I was the one who answered the door. Karen. Hello, I'm Karen and I live down the street. I'm the secretary of the Neighborhood Homeowners Association. We demand to know why your house has reached the terrible state it's in. Me. No, you aren't. I know for a fact that your homeowners association doesn't exist. My late father checked into that when he bought the house, and a lawyer looked into it just after he passed. So, stop lying. Karen. Well, I am still entitled to know why your house is in this state. Me. Not my house. It was my father's house, now it's in my mother's name and that of my older brother. And you aren't entitled to anything, but if your sanctimonious butt wants to know and harass the grieving widow of a veteran and her spinster daughter, fine. You're about my parents' age, so my father lost his life to a battle with cancer caused by his service in a war so that people like you could spit on him upon his return. Instead of claiming to be from a homeowners association that doesn't exist, be honest and say that you are demanding an explanation that you have no right to. We're not in city limits either, so you can't try to whine about the city ordinances. Karen. Well, it's still lowering the property values. Me. Then why are you demanding an explanation for yourself rather than offering to help? I know most of the neighborhood knows, they brought food. I don't have time for this, you're trespassing, and you have 10 seconds to start leaving the property before I call the county sheriffs. If you come back, they will be called unless you are escorted by a Girl Scout with a cookie order form. Get bent. The last story is entitled Neighbor Thinks Street Parking is Only His, Karma Responds. This happened this morning, and I really love it when karma steps in. Also, I'm pregnant and easily irritated, so I will fully acknowledge this as a small case of entitled behavior that doesn't have a huge impact on daily life. We live in a residential neighborhood with single-family homes without driveways and street parking. For the most part, people tend to park in front of their own house, but it's street parking, so no one has any right to any spot, and sometimes you just have to park wherever you can. It's not usually a problem. 99% of the time we can find a spot on our block, and usually it's right in front of our house. It's one of those courtesy things in the neighborhood. Our next-door neighbors to the left have been a bit annoying with their parking habits. Apparently, there are birds in the tree in front of their house that poop on their vehicles. They have a pickup truck and an SUV. So, when they park, they tend to pull up the front car farther and basically sit almost right on our bumper to get more of that vehicle out from under their tree. So far, we've been able to get out as our neighbor to the right usually leaves for work before us, so there's lots of room in front of our car. But it's still annoying as sometimes we have had to do like a 50-point turn to get out. Think Austin Powers in that shuttle thing, back and forth, inching out. Yesterday they went farther though. The husband got home around 2 p.m., and there were 2 spots open in front of our houses. His wife's vehicle wasn't home yet, and neither was my husband's. He parked in the middle of the 2 spots, effectively taking both of them. My husband got home at 5 p.m., and parked a block away, came in and remarked, "Wow, what a crap parking job neighbor did." About half an hour later, we see his wife pull up. He goes out and moved his truck up so it's in front of our house, and she parks behind him. He saved the spot for her, and both were now parked away from the bird poop tree. Now, again, it's street parking, so we do not own the spot in front of our house. But that does not mean it's okay to park like an asshole to save your wife a spot. It's first come first serve. Also, my husband has a ton of heavy tools and equipment he has to unload after work, and I am pregnant with a toddler and sometimes groceries, diaper bag to carry, so while it's not really a big deal to have to park a block or 2 away just by luck, it's definitely an inconvenience that makes me a little mad when they purposely block the spot in front of our house. This morning, parking karma stepped in. My husband was on the front porch having his morning coffee when the husband comes out and gets in his truck to leave for work. Bam! Apparently, he hit the gas a little hard while in reverse and he smashed into his wife's SUV. I guess it would have been better if her vehicle was parked elsewhere. Side note. My husband noticed yesterday as well that the neighbor's truck has duck keyed into the driver's side door. Not sure the story behind it, but I'm gonna guess some type of road or parking rage incident. Thanks for listening.